I'm just so excited. I feel like I started writing in Halifax. I started writing at Dell. I started to figure out what my voice was. And I just had such a positive experience in Halifax. And so it just feels really wonderful to get to come back with something I'm so proud of and share that.
Hello and welcome to the 2023 Atlantic International Film Festival podcast. In this episode, we will discuss a film that explores modern emotional discontent with a quirky but familiar alternative reality. With Love at a Major Organ is set in a world where hearts are made of objects and suppressing emotions is self-care. Annabelle, a lonely woman, rips out her heart for the man she loves, only to discover that he's become intoxicated with it and decides to run away. I was joined by writer Julia Lederer, director Kim Albright, producer Madeleine Davis, and star Anna Maguire. Where did you get the idea for the play that eventually became this movie?
There was this love letter writing contest in the Walrus, like it would have been over 10 years ago. And I was sort of like at a point where I wanted to start something new as a writer. I feel like it was in like 2011 or something. And I just was like, what would it be like to just write a love letter? And so I just wrote the play. There are multiple letters, but I wrote sort of what was the first letter of the play. And then I performed it somewhere and got a bit of a response from it. And I was like, okay, so then what's the second letter? What's the third letter? Like, who is she writing to? And I take the subway a lot in Toronto. And also I'm a really big fan of, well, one playwright who I love is Sarah Ruhl, and she does a lot with emotion and magic realism. And I was thinking about her work too, and just the idea that you might pull your heart out felt so effective symbolically in terms of what I wanted to look at and explore, and sort of the issue that I often have in the world where I don't know. It's so hard to know what to do with your heart, like whether that's with another person or just engaging with the world around you in terms of allowing yourself to be vulnerable and emotionally invested. And it's just a lot. Feelings are a lot, and they can be wonderful and they can be difficult. And so I was thinking about that question too, in terms of writing the play. Yeah.
So, like, for Julia, for you and Kim, and then Madeleine, and eventually Anna, I guess, what was the process of getting the stage play and adapting it for a movie?
Yeah, it was quite a long process, and part of that was down to COVID too, because that kind of delayed things, but I think for the better. So we all met in 2017 approximately, and Anna had introduced us. So Anna and Julia were working on a project together, a short film together called It's Nothing. So Anna also writes and directs.
Screened it at Finn as well.
Oh, right.
We did screen it, and that's right.
Yeah.
It would have been in 2019. 2019.
Yeah. 2019.
So so those guys are working on something together, so they knew one another. And then I had lived in the UK for a good chunk of time and was moving back to Canada. And then I had asked Anna if she knew of any writers or of any material, or I just wanted to kind of sink my teeth into something coming back home to Canada. And then so she introduced me to Julia, and like Julia I think you were still touring with the play, like it was still very new and fresh. And then we met up and talked about this idea of like, oh, well, is there life, in the film version of this? And then, so that was kind of the genesis of it. And then I'd met Madeleine through a producer here in Vancouver called Lori Lazinski. And so we kind of, all met up and sort of formed this team way back when. And then the development of the project kind of started then, and there were deadlines we were applying to, and it gave us sort of something to focus our energies on and work on the script. And there were development grants sort of thrown in along the way, so it kind of gave us more time and finances to kind of keep developing it. And like there was the Whistler Screenwriting Lab, and then I was at the Canadian Film Center and Women in the Director's Chair. So these were sort of further opportunities to kind of keep developing and thinking on the film. So it was kind of quite a long process of about like a good sort of 5 years of developing the script.
And like the film's really hard to put in a box because it's kind of like fundamentally as a romance, then there's like dark sci-fi elements, and kind of there's some things I found really familiar, like the emotion, how people were dealing with emotions and kind of modern life, but also then you had those more fantastical moments with the concept of the hearts. So what was it like building that world? Obviously, you build a world on a stage, but how do you build that world on screen?
Good question. I don't know. You just do it. I mean, it was super. I love the fact that it was a bit of everything. There's a bit of comedy, there's a bit of magical realism, and sort of slightly futuristic elements. But I think at the end of the day, it was really just about it feeling as grounded as possible. And it is a world in a way. Apart from the heart removal business, that is basically like today, just maybe slightly pushed. So I think from the get-go, it was really about like, okay, we need the audience to connect to the material and connect to these characters. So it just has to sort of feel kind of normal. And so that was sort of, I think, the kind of grounding force between it all, and then we can throw in little kind of crazy things like, yeah, you can rip your heart out of your chest, or like, yeah, she's recording her feelings on this tape recorder, and the lights change, and we go into this whole other world. I think if you kind of ground the majority of it, then it lets you sort of jump into those other spaces with ease and with an audience kind of with you.
For me too, like one of the things that was the most exciting about the idea was thinking about, like, the play is three characters. So who's Annabelle's friend? Like, who's she friends with? Who are her parents? Where does she work? Like, none of that is in the play. It's really just centered around these three characters. And so getting to like make that world bigger, and also in reaction to that, figure out the rules of a bigger world, a bigger version of that world that does resemble our own, was an exciting sort of transition. And I always feel like I try to like write from a place that's like a sidestep outside of reality. So you can just turn things up a little bit and everything is recognizable, but there's something that is a little bit sharper or more heightened, or something that allows us to sort of like look at our world a little bit differently. And so it was challenging and fun to try to make that transition to screen as well, because there's so many more elements to it in a film than there is in a three-person play.
And Anna, playing Annabelle as a free spirit crushed by a world of conformity, or at least battling against a world of conformity, how much of yourself did you put into that?
I mean, none at all. It was really hard as a super conformist person. It was just pretty difficult to find that. And I really had to do a lot of research. No, yeah, it was challenging. It was challenging, though. I mean, I'm only half joking, because I think that Annabelle isn't very happy, even though I think she wants to understand what it means to find peace or find happiness. And I think by the end of the film, she, if not completely understands that, is part of the way there, has had a big realization or shift that will allow her to move forward in a new direction. But I think at the beginning of the film, she is really frustrated and at her wit's end, actually. And so that was really, really hard, because to be in that space and to hold that space whilst also having a sense of hope, because I think she is an inherently hopeful person, was challenging, because there is a darkness there too. Well, I guess that's the point, right? With everything is its opposite. If you have light, you therefore have the equal amount of dark.
I really like the party scene. That kind of really came to light how different she was, or how different she become from her friend groups with the cheesy puffs and everything. It was a great visual. Julia, were you pulling kind of from personal experience as well as, like, friends change over time and groups change? Were you, that was kind of a lot of the real world element that kind of was really identifiable or really relatable, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that a lot of friendships change, and I was thinking a lot about, like, especially with social media, it's so easy to keep in touch with like everyone you've ever met or like been in a class with. And I was sort of like, what are the things that maintain relationships? Because inevitably both people are going to change. And that can be wonderful. And I've had friendships change immeasurably in positive ways, or in ways that they just transition and they're still just as strong. But I think sometimes there can be moments of like, are we just staying friends because we've always been friends, but it's actually like a reach for both of us? And is it easier to acknowledge that, or do you keep doing it? Like, I don't know. It's interesting to me to think about friendships in that way a little bit, because they can be like the most significant relationships in my life a lot of the time, and they have been, and I'm really proud of that and happy about that. But they're also challenging and just as complex as any other relationship. And so that's definitely something that I was drawing from. Yeah.
One of the lines I really loved was where the mother asks her son, what did you do today? And he says, mainly clicking and scrolling, which kind of was really harsh and made me feel like that describes most jobs these days. So it was amazing. I kind of really summed everything up. But I really liked how you captured the essence of a commute and the boring kind of humdrum, how inhumane a commute can be for a lot of people. And I guess that was captured in terms of performance, in terms of how you shot it, in terms of like the design, and also in terms of costume. So how did you go about kind of keeping it anchored in a really relatable experience for the audience in those kinds of scenes, I guess?
Well, didn't Madeleine? So many of the crew was based in Madeleine's knowledge of the crew in Vancouver, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of people that I'd worked with before, and I think that as soon as Kim and I started working together and we started getting funding coming in, I think our wardrobe stylist, we first talked about the project in 2018, maybe. Like, it was just kind of immediately I sort of started thinking about who would be good people to bring on, and a lot of those people ended up staying with the project.
Yeah, I really had to lean on Madeleine for this actually, because this was my first production in Vancouver in BC, and I had done a little something in Toronto years ago, but this is essentially my first big thing here in Canada, and I didn't know anyone really, like, apart from Madeleine. And we hadn't even like done a project, like, as in shot a film together yet. So this was like really my first film shooting here, and I had none of those relationships existing already. So I really had to lean onto Madeleine and her contacts, and her ideas and thoughts as to who, like, I'd get on with and who'd be right for the project, and who'd be wanting to do the project as well. And yeah, so that was all down to Madeleine.
What was the experience like shooting in BC?
It was great. I mean, I have to say it was hard not having those relationships in place already. So you're kind of just like feeling each other out and learning about one another, like, basically on set, and in pre-production as well. But I mean, I thought, we had a really young, vibrant, enthusiastic crew, and it was a really tight budget. So everyone really had to, be resourceful and work so hard. But I think, everyone was really hungry, and, we really worked hard to find people that were in love with a project just as much as us, because that was really what was going to sort of sustain them from beginning to end. I'm really proud of the whole team, and from pre-production all the way into post. It was a long journey in post-production as well, and again, finding like-minded individuals to sort of see us to the finish line.
And there was some really like kind of purposeful framing and color choices in terms of the grade and everything through the film. Did you kind of have any particular inspiration, or was that kind of vision clear? And was it, was that linked to the play in terms of how things were too?
There were certain colors that were important to kind of carry on into the film from the play. But in terms of like so for instance, like purple is her color. And so her jacket, and I wanted to use this, be inspired by purple, and use this color when we kind of go into her imagination, like when she's doing waltzing with George in the art gallery, or when she's recording her tape recorded messages, like not just purple, but kind of other colors mixed in. But having that kind of base of purple. Yeah, and I worked quite closely with Leo Harim, our DP, and Megan McCauley, production designer, and also Dave Tomiak, who did our color. And in terms of like, what is the color landscape of the film, when she is sort of living her best life, or at the beginning of the film, and when we go into the sort of magical realist scenes, when she's recording her messages, or when she's having the dancing. So they all had sort of a different palette. But then what does it look like when she's ripped her heart out? So like we had to think about all those different kind of the timeline for Annabelle, but also how she contrasts the world in which she's living in. So we tried to sort of really lean into, what Vancouver has to offer in terms of the gray and the bleak skies and the grim kind of February weather. And, and lean into that, and kind of, I think in Grade as well, we even enhanced that even more, like the gray kind of, we added a bit of green to the sky, but also always kind of comparing, how does she stand out within that, or her scenes in contrast to those scenes. So we really sort of had to look at it sort of like a board, like the colors of the whole film, and look at the different scenes within that entire kind of mosaic, which is fun. I love that. It was really cool to kind of think about the palette at the outset, and then bring that into shooting, and then also kind of push it further in the grade. I love that bit.
We've got to talk about the hearts, because obviously that's like one of the key concepts of the movie. But also, I found that the scene where kind of the guy on the oceanfront pulls his heart out built so much intrigue from that first moment, because you're kind of going, "What the hell's going on? What is that glowing color that's happening?" So, how did you kind of take that concept of the heart from the play and then kind of make that work? Because you use the color from the heart really effectively to kind of show particular transitions, and kind of you use the kind of exterior shots with the light in the room changing. Tell me a little bit about how that was kind of developed as a concept.
Well, I mean, the colours were always part of the play from the beginning, right? The purple plaid jacket was like the main prop. That was like the only thing that was immovable, I think, right? Was that in like
It was like, she has to rip her heart out, and there needs to be a purple plaid jacket. Everything else can change.
Change everything else, but those two things must remain.
But it is quite different, right? Like, the play is a starting place for some of the main characters and those two ideas, but the film, like, I think this is a great thing, is like wildly different. And we see multiple hearts and their objects in the film, which is different from the play, which came from Kim and from Madeleine in developing the script.
Yeah, and I knew off the bat that this wasn't going to be a film where, like, you see from the front someone's like hand going in, like, bleh. Like, it wasn't going to be that sort of film. And so I knew from the outset that, okay, the man on the cliff. Shout out to William Vaughn, who plays our emotional man on the cliff. I loved his weeping. So that I knew, okay, well, we have to.
I loved his weeping.
It's so good. You see him from behind, and his weeping is just so just sucks you in. I knew that okay, the first 5 minutes really has to grab the audience, and it has to be intriguing, a little bit mysterious. So how can we best do that? And so I thought, well, and I also knew, because I don't want to see this hand reaching into a chest and bloody and guts and hearing the ribs crack and all that we needed to find a language to best represent this heart removal, because we see it like at least 4 times in the film. So what's the most consistent and best way of showing this to the audience so they get it? Like, okay, oh, that's what's going to happen again. Oh my God. So I think we set that up at the first, with Emotional Man on the Cliff. You see, for pretty much all the heart removals in the film, you see it from behind, and you see it, like, Anna can probably speak to the body language, but you kind of, see someone hunched over, and then you hear it, and then it's a musical cue, and then it results in a light. Like, you see a light kind of emanating, be it from a room or outside or from across the cliff or whatever it is. You kind of see this light. And so I kind of knew, well, we have to sort of set this formula right from the beginning, so the audience knows what's coming. And I thought that was like a cost-effective way of doing it as well, versus like the blood and guts. And I just thought, oh, that's not this sort of film. That's not kind of the tone. I'd rather it be a bit more tasteful.
Not body horror. We weren't going.
Yeah, no, exactly.
No. Yeah.
Not Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Yeah,
No.
great film,
Just a different film.
Different approach.
Not our film.
And I love the kind of the fact that everyone's heart was slightly different. You know, there was kind of a slight design different in terms of what it was. I suppose they were, you know, the objects they were, and also how you transported it with the tape recorder in a kind of a cooler and everything. There was like kind of lots of creative choices that kind of really fitted in that world, but weren't necessarily obvious. So, you know, kind of you obviously went down a thought process. So yeah, when it came to kind of like picking hearts and how you transport a heart, where were your heads?
That cooler came from you, Julia.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cooler is in all versions of the script. It just seemed like that's the way they do it. I don't know why. That was why. Yeah, that's just how it is.
I mean, it makes sense. If I
Yeah.
had to transport a heart in a kind of ad hoc way, it would definitely be in a cooler. I mean, yeah, it's a good, if it ain't break, don't fix it.
And I think for the heart objects, I knew there were some that were kind of in place from early days, like from the play, really, like the lantern and the paper heart. And I think, like, so for instance, Emotional Man, his heart, we there were certain rules we had to kind of abide by, I think. And this sort of stemmed also from Leo and production designer. Leo's our DP and our production designer Megan, because she had to make it. And so and Leo had to make it glow. So we kind of had to rule out certain ideas because it needed to sort of realistically seem it could come from someone's chest, so it had to sort of be approximately sort of heart-shaped size and needed to glow, so it basically needed to be kind of somewhat transparent. And Megan needed to be able to make it or source it.
A lot of it came from not wanting to do it in visual effects, like wanting to have a practical heart that we could see that had a light inside it. And I think that having those constraints really meant that I feel like we all kind of had to work together to think about how to fit within those constraints so that we could actually have a heart-sized object that was a real object that could fit a light inside it that could glow on camera.
Yeah. Lots of lists of possibilities sent back and forth for sure.
I actually think that was one of the biggest challenges, come to think of it, right? Like, thinking back to, like, we're scrambling up until, because I think we were shooting that scene, with the vase heart on day 2. So we had to just suss it out really quite early, but we only really figured it out a couple days before we were shooting. That was a mini heart attack. Anyway.
I'm glad you didn't go for special effects. I quite like the practical element to it. I thought it was more engaging to have those real objects. But one of the other things I loved was the clinic, you know, where people go to suppress different emotions. It was I find it kind of really dark and really interesting, but also it kind of was reminiscent of self-help or health spas, I guess. So, like, tell me a little bit about the inspiration for it, but also how you kind of put that together, because I thought it was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
I can't remember what point. I feel like that came in my memory of it was like halfway through the development process or something. Like we were still finding it.
It was after Whistler that it came out.
It was after, right? Yeah, and it was like, how can we? Because I think a big transition was like, what things can we do that are like very visually delicious? That film can do so much better than, well, I don't want to say better, but does with so much more focus than theater. And so in that adaptation, which is really, the film is very much its own entity. The play is very different, but that was totally new in terms of the film. And part of that was like, what is something that we can do, that we can see, that is a dial turned up from self-help now, that is not totally like, yeah, you're like, wow, that's an intense idea, but you're also like, I can see that happening. Like, give it a few years, I can see it happening. And so just to get to do something like that was really fun, and also to just think about just the details of it were really fun, to figure out like the different floors and what happens in each room and all of that, for me anyway. And then the visuals were all like, I don't know how you all figured that out. It looks so cool. So yeah.
That was actually a disused, correct me if I'm wrong, Madeleine, but that was a mental institution. So when we were wrecking this place, man, it was some of the rooms that we didn't use or feature. And you just sort of look at the equipment in there and think, oh my gosh, what happened in here, 50 some odd years ago. Anyhow, we really wanted to lean into the darkness of this, and really push the dark element of the Small House of Big Feels, and we could have so much fun with it. And I really that's exactly what I wanted to do. And so chatting with Leo, our DP, I said, okay, I want each room to have a very different look and a sort of color palette and feel. And so you have that one room, the meditation room, where, it's practically blinding. And so, and it's like white and everyone, it looks very clinical. And in other rooms where, you have this yellow light kind of pouring in and it's kind of dark and gloomy. But at the same time, it had to feel grounded. But we knew, this is where we can really push things visually and let the audience go places where maybe they didn't expect to go. And it is messed up. I mean, even the receptionist Sandra, you think like, what is going on with her? Like she welcomes them in such a weird way, and so she's the kind of gatekeeper to this world, and I think sort of sets the tone quite nicely for what you're about to experience in those rooms. And even going down the elevator, I think Annabelle says like, where do I start? And she's confused going into this as well. So is very much sort of the audience's eyes as they're about to experience it. So there's little kind of breadcrumbs that kind of, I think, lead you into the experience fully, thanks to like the performances and the actors. But that was fun. I loved shooting those scenes and seeing it on the screen.
Anna, what was that like for you in terms of performance? Obviously, every room's got different emotions. It was kind of I guess it must have been keep you on your toes with each kind of different setup.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun, to be honest. Although, yeah, thinking back to that location, it had very dark energy. There was and I think that comes across in the actual film, because there's something very sinister about it. And actually, the history, I don't know the full history of that particular building, but I do know that things that I gleaned, and it seems to be a location that is used a lot in Vancouver, and that there's a real dark history about the way people who were kept there were treated, and then how people were treated when they were when the doors were opened up and everyone was turned out into the streets. So yeah, it's got its own energy, which I hope that we honoured.
Definitely, it felt like Black Mirror-esque kind of moment for the movie. So yeah, I definitely got that impression on screen. So. And then another element that you had that was kind of reality dialed up slightly, I guess, or slightly ahead, was the AI app that coaches people through life, almost telling them what to say and think and everything. So where did that come from?
Similar, like it's just like what's one step further than what we have, because when you think about it, like remember when doing therapy online seemed like totally out there idea because therapy is an in-person thing. And I know COVID changed that a lot, but well before COVID, there were apps that were starting to appear. And I think it's a similar track, right? It's like we depend on, and myself included, like I depend on technology to tell me how to get places. I've been 6 times, like for all of these sort of absurd things. And so why wouldn't we depend on it more emotionally, especially in a world where we're really trying to focus and kind of escape the chaos of our emotions? And so it was just like, yeah, turning that up a little bit. And why can't, if we're looking at love as sort of a transactional thing and a practical thing as much as it is, or even more so than an emotional thing, why can't an app do that?
So looking ahead to the festival, what are you excited about in terms of screening and kind of attending, and also, being with an audience when you share the film?
Well, this is our second Canadian screening. So we had our Canadian premiere at Fantasia, which was really thrilling, just to sort of see it on home soil. So this will be the second public screening in Canada, and it's sort of the other side. Well, I'm in Vancouver, so for me it's the other side. But yeah, I've never been to this festival, so I'm so excited that the film is making its way there. Sadly, I won't be able to make it, but I know Julia's going to be there flying the flag high for the film. So yeah, Julia, you have to report back and fill us in on how the audience responds.
Yeah, I'm just so excited. I feel like I started writing in Halifax. I started writing at Dell. I started to figure out what my voice was, and I just had such a positive experience in Halifax. I thought about moving back, and I just haven't been there really since I graduated, and so it just feels really wonderful to get to come back with something I'm so proud of and share that. yeah, so and I can't wait to see everything else and to sort of reconnect with people and just be in Halifax and celebrate films. I'm really excited about it.
Madeleine, in terms of being a Canadian producer, how difficult is it to actually get a feature like this off the ground?
It's quite difficult. I mean, I think it's difficult to get independent cinema made probably anywhere in the world. I think that it's just sort of by nature harder than maybe it should have to be. We did, I think, in total 22 grant applications for this film.
We did. Oh my God.
Even Kim looks surprised by that.
I thought you were going to say like maybe 6.
No, we did a lot of applications. And we were really fortunate with, the funding that we got, and obviously having Telefilm on board quite early really helped. But I think a lot of Canadian producers kind of run into this challenge of finding the whole budget is really, really challenging. It's one thing to get to kind of 75 or 80% of the budget. It's another thing to get to that last 20%. And we never really totally got there. So quite a few of us didn't make nearly as much money as we probably could have given the amount of work we put into this film. So I think, independent cinema just truly is like a labor of love in that way.
And at least in Canada, I feel like it's considered an art form still. Like you can still make films via the Arts Council, albeit with a smaller budget. But in the UK, it's not considered an art form if you look at the way it's funded. You cannot apply to make films via Arts Council because they're considered commercial. They're not considered art. I think it's a mistake to be thinking of independent cinema as a commercially viable career. And I think that we do across the board need to really look at that and reframe what that looks like and what that means. I think Canada is a special place to make work. Nowhere's perfect, but there is at least some kind of recourse to make independent cinema.
I feel like this is like you're all here. This was a real team effort, I'm guessing. Have you formed like a totally new bond from this experience?
I think all our periods synced when we were at South by
Southwest. It did. Yeah. That is a special kind of bond.
For better or for worse, that is a special kind of bond.
Yeah, I mean, we've been on this together for 5 years plus, and through the ups and downs, it was really hard. It was really hard kind of for all of us, to just ride the wave and get through the ups and downs. Then COVID hit, and we still wanted to kind of push forward, and it was challenging, and so that's why it's so it's like so great to be out the back end and be celebrating it now and having it behind us and looking forward to how does this film kind of help us individually with our careers and beyond, so it's really been a cool journey to be on all together. And it's nice to kind of be out the back end as well, because it was hard. Like the indie films are hard.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to come and see the screening of With Love and a Major Organ, Julia, you're going to be at the festival, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Fantastic. So hopefully people can check the film out afterwards as well. Is there any way they'll be able to view the film in the future?
They can keep coming to the film festivals we get into. Just so you know, it's screening on Sunday the 17th at 1 p.m. I think in Theater 7. And yeah, we definitely have other festivals lined up. Some in Canada, some in the States, hopefully one in Europe. But yeah, it will be at festivals for the foreseeable future, and then hopefully elsewhere after.
Yeah, more news to come.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Kim, Anna, Julia, Madeleine, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the 2023 Atlantic International Film Festival podcast. Don't forget that this guest and many more will be showcasing the best of international cinema across Halifax from September 14th to the 21st. You can find out more about the events and book tickets by visiting atlanticfilmfestival.ca. I've been Rhys Waters. Now go watch a movie.